There's really nothing like spending time under the magnificent canopy of the night sky. The scale of it all is just mind-blowing, and the more you learn about it, the more amazing it becomes. They're not just stars. There are meteors, planets, galaxies, nebulae, all out there to be discovered. I'm going to show you a few tips and techniques for getting the most out of your astrophotography, both for wide-angle starscapes and deep sky objects. I'll be using the Canon EOS R with an incredibly sensitive 30 megapixel sensor. Its modified infrared filter reveals light at wavelengths most cameras can't detect. I've experimented with astrophotography techniques before, but tonight I'm going to push it to the next level using the features on the EOS Ra. My first tip to anyone wanting to try out night sky photography is that careful planning is key. The first thing I always check is the weather. You don't want cloudy skies because that will obscure the stars. And also wind can be a problem, shaking the camera when you're doing those long exposure shots. You also want to have a look at the phase of the moon. I try to avoid a week either side of full moon because that really bright moonlight can easily overpower the dim light from the stars. I've come to Calar Alto in southern Spain. We're at 2,200 meters above sea level here, so we're well away from sources of light pollution. And as you can see from the observatories behind me, we've come to the right spot. I'm scouting around, much as I would for any landscape photography, looking for great composition with some good foreground. But I need to factor in my astronomical features of interest, in this case the Milky Way core. The core is the centre of our galaxy, and it's the brightest and most colourful part of the Milky Way. There are plenty of apps out there that use augmented reality to show you where celestial objects will be at any given time. And don't forget, this will vary according to your location and the time of year. The app's telling me that at 9 o'clock tonight, the Milky Way core is going to be just nicely on the right-hand side of my frame, just behind the observatory, so that's just what I'm looking for. There's a little bit of wind just blowing up now, so just to keep my tripod really steady, I'm going to put some rocks in it to weigh it down. The sun's gone down now, and thankfully the clouds are clearing fast, so I'm going to try a shot. Camera settings for shooting the Milky Way as wide angle are fairly straightforward. I'm using the RF 15-35 f2.8 lens. I tend to use manual exposure always, and I'm using manual focus. Manually focusing on stars can be tricky, but there are digital zoom settings on live view to help you out, both 5x and 30x magnification. As a starting point, I'm going for a shutter speed of around 25 seconds. Any longer and you start seeing the stars as trails rather than points. I'm shooting at ISO 3200, which I find is a sweet spot for minimal noise but with enough light sensitivity. A wide lens with a maximum aperture of f2.8 or faster really helps with gathering that precious light. I'm shooting in RAW to maximise the potential for post-processing. I want to avoid joggling the camera when I press the shutter release, so I can either use a remote control, the Canon Camera Connect app, or I can just use a 2-second delay on the shutter release. Here goes, I'm pressing the shutter button. Now all I have to do is wait while those precious photons fall onto the sensor, having travelled all that way from outer space. Right, let's have a look. Ah, nice. Milky Way is really showing up nicely. I've got an idea now. For a bit of added interest, I'm going to put myself in the shot, but I've got to be quick. 10-second timer. Getting some motion into shots is the logical progression from wide-angle single-frame astrophotography. Because it's a slow process, many people aren't aware that owing to the Earth's rotation, the stars appear to move across the sky, rising in the east and setting in the west, just like the sun. This can look really cool as a time-lapse video clip. For time-lapse videos, Your basic camera settings are going to be exactly the same as the ones we just used for the still images. Now on the EOS RA, there are two basic ways of making a time-lapse video. You can use the inbuilt time-lapse mode in the camera and that will produce a ready-made 4K video file. Or you can use a timer remote working as an interval timer to get a series of raw images that you can work on your computer, process them and then put them together as a video file on the computer. In time-lapse movie mode, I'm using a resolution of 4K, an interval of 30 seconds between shots, 300 shots, and it's now telling me that I'll get 12 seconds of playback for a recording time of about 2.5 hours. Right, while the time lapse is running, I'm going to get some shelter and have a brew. To add an extra level of movement, I sometimes use a motorised motion control slider, which will move the camera a metre sideways over the course of a couple of hours and 300 images. This is a sped up preview. When I actually do it, the camera will move this distance over the space of about 2 hours, taking about 300 shots. So that will give me about a 10-second playback with the Milky Way moving and the camera moving across the ground. If you want to really delve into the hidden secrets of the universe, you're going to need a longer lens or a telescope. For deep sky astrophotography, I'm not so bothered about the landscape features. I just want to be able to see as much sky as possible, so I've moved location slightly. Using long lenses or telescopes comes with its own challenges. Because many of the deep sky objects are very dim, we have to use long exposure times. And that means that the Earth's rotation causes our stars to form into long streaked lines. Now to help us with this, there's a very clever device called an equatorial mount. I've got one here. It's essentially a motorised tripod head that compensates for the Earth's rotation and should give us nice, crisp, round stars. It's worth really taking your time with the polar alignment of the equatorial mount. And once you've done that, the camera will track celestial objects very accurately as they move across the sky, giving you pin-sharp images. In order to set up the equatorial mount perfectly, you need to align its main axis to the axis of the Earth. And this essentially means you're pointing the axis of rotation of the equatorial mount directly at the pole star if you're in the northern hemisphere. You can mount a variety of different lenses on the equatorial mount depending on the subject matter you're most interested in. To achieve the maximum magnification, I can use a telescope. The principles are still the same, it's just a very big lens. I'm using the same equatorial mount and focusing manually. The EOS Ra fits on the back with an adapter. Now it's all calibrated and set up, I'm going to find something exciting. Let's take a look at the Andromeda Galaxy. This is one of the most distant objects you can see with the naked eye. But with the naked eye, it just looks like a faint blurry star. However, a 60-second exposure with this 400mm lens reveals it in its full glory. I'm using a remote shutter release and shooting a 60-second exposure at ISO 3200. Moment of truth, let's see if that worked. Wow! That is absolutely stunning. A perfect spiral galaxy. That is definitely the biggest and furthest object I've ever photographed. It's 2.5 million light years away. So we're seeing it as it was 2.5 million years ago, before there were even modern humans on the Earth. After shooting these light frames, I'm also going to shoot some dark frames with the lens cap on. Later on, I can use specialist astrophotography software to stack a set of light frames and combine them with the dark frames to enhance image detail and reduce image noise. I want to look for a nebula now. Nebulae are huge, swirling clouds of gas where stars are born. One of the most impressive nebulae visible at the moment is the Orion Nebula. Again, I'm going for a 60-second exposure at ISO 3200. Well, that 60-second exposure is now finished, and I'm going to take a look at what we've got. Ah, that's fantastic. You really get a sense that that's a huge 24 light year across swirling mass of gas. It's the birthplace of stars, and we're getting really rich colours out of it. I can see purples and pinks and reds, and of course the EOS RA is letting about 4 times more of that infrared light through, so we're really getting a much richer picture than we would with other similar cameras. Seeing for myself what's out there and usually hidden to the naked eye, astrophotography has given me a new perspective on the mysteries of the night sky, and I'm really pleased with the images I've got from the EOS RA.